All right, here it is. This is the final video lecture for Intro to Journalism and New Media. I'll let you pause for time to relax and celebrate and cheer and have a parade. Was it a good parade? I'm glad it was. Okay, this is the final chapter for that we are going to be doing a video lecture for. It's about interviewing. We talked about some of the basics of reporting, and an essential skill for doing any kind of story is interviewing. So get out of your comfort zones. You're talking to someone who's been very, very, very shy in the past. I'm the last person anybody thought would ever do an interview, conduct an interview, and just go up and talk to perfect strangers, and then sometimes have to talk to people who have some sort of notoriety and governors of states and political people and athletes and other sorts of people. So if I can do it, you can do it. If this is what you want to do and this is how you want to have your life follow, well, you're going to have to know how to interview. And there's some rules and some things that just you have to know. And that's what this is all about. I've conducted many, many interviews. I've got it pretty well down. With that, I think I do. It's not so bad. But there's a good way to interview and a bad way to interview. And we're going to try to find the good way to interview. All right. And away we go. All right. Learning objectives. Prepare for the interview by creating open and closed-ended questions. We'll talk about that. Compare interviewing opportunities, knowing how to approach interview sources, fixing bad questions and asking better ones, and using that wonderful thing called critical thinking to evaluate source and planned approach. How you're going to plan your interview and be on when you're interviewing, you have to know how to be able to roll with the punches of a given interview and pick up on things and nonverbal communication and physical cues and all sorts of things like that. And that's all part of interviewing. So let's get going. All right. Avoiding awkwardness. Well, if you think about it, asking someone to interview is always it's an awkward proposition to begin with, because you're asking someone to be part of your story, be it in a print form or a audio form or video form, and you're going to have lots of different people that you be interviewing, and sometimes you have to give them a call. Sometimes they may be at an event or at a news occurrence or something like that. You might book it. It might be spur of the moment. It might be a person on the street. We'll talk about all those things. But it's always a little awkward. I mean, you'll have certain people that are used to doing interviews, especially for PR firms or who work like media relations or something like that for a company. They're used to it. That's the job. They're usually pretty easy to book, just finding time to do whatever they need to do. Or they might even have created an event that they want people to come to. They're usually pretty easy to have interviews with, because they're usually polished answers. And then you've got people, you might interview experts like a professor of science for something about astronomy or something. And so because they know what maybe something's happening, you have to, and then that's your authority figure, because they really know a lot about that specific subject. And so with that, you don't want to seem, that you're ignorant about certain things, you're not knowledgeable about what you're talking about. So you have to at least have some sort of base knowledge, to have to do some research there. The one thing I always do, I'm always, when I'm doing an interview, one of the first things I assure the person, well, because remember, I'm from television, and most of the time I was doing a lot of these interviews by myself, all right, in the field with my camera, getting everything. And the first things I tell him was like, all right, it's just me and you. We're having a conversation. Camera's not here. Look at me. Camera's not there. Just me and you having a conversation back and forth. That's a big part of this. I mean, and you're going to learn some tips about how to prepare questions and the way we go through this. But it's the best thing is trying to make sure that you and the person that you're at ease with that person, that the person feels comfortable with you, because they're gonna be able to give you more they're gonna be more comfortable giving you more in depth answers to your questions. They'll when you want to follow up on things, they'll be more open to that. So it's and just simply saying those words, it makes it's like breaking the ice. And be human, be a human being. Don't when you or interviewing isn't okay. I have this list of questions and I'm going to read them robotically and I'm scared. No, it's okay to refer to them. But remember, you're having a conversation with that person, and you want to get the most information from them. You want them to feel as comfortable as possible in this situation. And, sometimes you'll be in tough situations with certain interviews, but lots of interviews you're going to do, it's a conversation, and you want it, and the whole point is to get as much information and certain things. I am also looking for certain good sound bites to work with it. Everything's a little different, depends on your story. But that's the whole thing with interviewing. The interviews are a big part of the story, either through sources about certain topics. It could be about eyewitnesses to seeing things. That's the good crux of a story, isn't it? Well, how it's affecting the people in that story. A good story it goes around a lot of times reaction of what's going on in that story and how it affects people. And the interview is an essential part of any news story, and being able to interview is an essential skill, and it takes time to try and work that and perfect that style of what you do. And yes, of course, you think about it, life, like it says here, series of questions and answers. Every time you talk to a friend or anybody, you go back and forth and talking. You got to just think from that standpoint. Yeah, you have a specific mindset in what you want or certain information, and it's a little different, but that's what life is. And don't worry. And we first get started, it is stressful, and don't get too worried, because sometimes those of us who've been doing interviews for a while, we get a little edgy sometimes. If I were to do an interview again, I did some last time. It was like sometime last year for my MFA project and what I was doing in 360 journalism and what I was doing with that. And when I first started doing it, again, it was a little edgy, but then it didn't take long because I knew the stories I was trying to tell and knew what I was looking for, getting some information on that, and it came back to me. The interviews came back, and it was like whole thing riding a bike again. And but yeah, so don't be too anxious about the whole interview process. It's essential if you want to do this. All right. Thinking critically. All right. Why are we interviewing? All right. These are questions. These are good questions. You have to when you're interviewing, you have to be very a critical thinker because you have to be quick on your feet. You have to be able to come up with quick questions on your feet, going by what they say, and listening and not getting so caught up in the list of questions. Yes, your questions are important, and there as the base there. And I'm not saying throw them out or anything. But I'm saying it's important to be able to be quick on your feet and listen carefully, and be able to, as you're listening to them, form questions in your mind as they're saying things. to get maybe even dig a little deeper for the full or more complete story. So there's some things you have to think about, like, all right, who is this person? Um, it makes sense, yeah. Like, why are we interviewing this person? Um, it's how do they relate to the story? Why are we talking to this person for this story? Why are they important for this story? So, what value do they have to this story? These are all parts of why you're going to ask certain people to interview in any given story. So you have to look at that, and you have to and understand each part of certain stories have certain angles, and what direction you decide to take that story depends on who you're going to have in that story to give you information and help tell the story to the people of why this is important to this community. Remember, it's audience centric. So once again, it's you have to. Well, so why who is this person? Okay, and there's different reasons for that. They make in the book they make the example of they're talking about school system, the area school system, and budget cuts. Yeah, you might interview the superintendent and ask about budget cuts in classrooms and overcrowding and access to educational materials. Um, that's one way to look at it. But then you can take that, but then also talk to students affected by that. Now, I will tell you this for many, many years. Kids, I have a kid. I love kids. Kids are great. They are not great for interviews. Uh, if you do have an interview with a kid, definitely don't ask them yes or no questions. All right, they're because they're going to go with that, and for whatever reason, it's just biological. Their brains are not fully developed yet, and especially when you're looking for those quotes and those sound bites for your stories, you really have to go mining. Like coal miners, you have to mine for the story, mine for your answers to get more complex, more compound sentence, the detailed answers, because that's what you need to tell the story, especially in a video standpoint, where I came from, and because they just they don't have the capacity to give you full uh, answers. And so a lot of times when you ask them a question, you're going to have to say why or how, or you're going to have to pull more teeth to get more full answers. Even if you can get a couple sentences out of them, great. That's why a lot of times when you see a lot of these stories, and what does little Jimmy think of this? There's always some sort of narration for that. It's awesome because they're great for that. On a television standpoint, kids, remember, part of it is visual television, and one of the biggest things that you can get from, and the best things you can get from kids in telling those stories, are the natural sound of them interacting and them playing and doing whatever it is they're supposed to be doing, performing or whatever. The reason that you're there, that's their best value to them, not necessarily the interview with the kids most of the time. Because when you do, there's going to have to be a lot of setup to when they do get their interview bites in there. It's just the way it is. You just have to work around that. They're not there. It's not a slight against it. It's just developmentally they're not there. Biologically, they're just not there yet, and they're not able to commit. Very few kids can do that. Even some really smart, sharp kids who do this a little bit, and it's hard to find them. It's really hard to find them. So just know that it's like pulling teeth a lot of times. Your average kid just can't do that, so you got to set them up a lot. All right. Oh, and also, how badly do I need the source? How important are they to that story? Um, Is there a lot of sources for a particular topic? Or is this person one of very few people who really know what's going on, or might be an inside person? So you want to be able to know that you have to treat them with kid gloves and be a little more uh, reasonable, or uh, entertain them a little more, depending on the story, how important they are to that story, and that's all part of that. How critical are they to that story? So these are things you have to think about when you're thinking when you're doing any story you go out there to produce, be it print or audio or video wise. All right. So this is how we work. All right. Um, so it's every story is going to be a little different. Okay. How badly do I need the source? Like I said, it might be someone of real value. Then it might be just someone who you might be going to the local county fair and getting a regular person off the street. It's not that important. Okay, so you have to think about those requests. Sometimes those requests, sometimes they'll ask you for anonymity or off the record, which we'll talk about soon, depending on your story. How important are they to that story? And you have to sit down and take a look and think, okay, I can't do this story without them. What are their requests? Are they reasonable? Um, it's just these are things you have to think about. There's going to be doing lots of different types of stories, and every story is a little different. Other things. Sometimes people, especially in this day and time where you've got quick turnarounds, it's, always seems to be more and more and more and more work, and you're not getting paid for it anymore, and you've got all these wonderful electronic sources, and it's in some ways it's easier, and communication has been easier in a lot of ways. Um, Sometimes email interviews can work, like after you've had an interview with someone, or there's a couple of quick little details that you weren't sure of, or you just wanted the spelling of someone, or just it could be confirmation of a quick little piece of information that's easily answered through an email. Then that's okay. Uh, so for that reason, for simple answers, they're fine for that. Also, sometimes people like doing that because they can sit and think about that. It's not necessarily good for you. That's pros for the people interviewing, the interview subject, person you're interviewing. But then also, it does have the standpoint from, oh, I never said that. Well, you wrote it right down. It's in your email, so you can't really say you never said that when you actually wrote it in your email. I directly copied and pasted exactly what you said, put some quotes around it, and I. What do you want me to do? You wrote that. Um, so if they have that aspect, but there's so many other aspects of how email doesn't work well. Lots of times, well, one, you're not bonding with them, you're not meeting with them. I've been in many interviews, and there is, like I said, you're. It's more than just me asking questions and that person answering. You're setting up a relationship, even though it might be just a short relationship. You're trying to bond with them. You're trying to connect with them. It's more than just answering a bunch of questions and them go a monotone way. You're having a conversation. That's why I say when you first start, reassure them this is a conversation where we're just going back and forth, and they need to get some information. And they'll be much more open. If you're doing it through email, you're not going to get that face to face bond, that face to face connection that when you're talking with them, and you're not going to be able to pick up on tones. You're not going to be able to pick up on nonverbal communication. You're not going to be able to pick up on certain information or be able to even um, follow up on things that they might say in some instances because you weren't there. You weren't in the room with them talking to them because, as you know, people if they're verbal communication and nonverbal communication, and you know when you're talking to someone what that atmosphere is about and how it's going there. You cannot substitute that with email. And you're not gonna get as complete a picture with those email interviews. That's not gonna happen. When you're sitting there right across from them, it's very different. You bond much differently. So that's I would try to stay away from email interviews as much as possible. Um, and especially with what I do from the video side, I need to see the person. It's from video. It's like I can't really. People try to do. Oh, we'll do it through email. I can't do it through email. I'm producing a video. I need this. I mean, I need at least. Now we're using a lot of because the pandemic. They're using a lot of Zoom type things, which we wouldn't they've done in the past, and Skype and stuff. It's been used. It's not to say it hasn't been, but now because of where we are, they're using it more than ever, and that's because of the extreme situation. But you're still wanting to get that person at least. You're at least somewhat talking to them, connecting with them in some way. Um, it's not quite as good as face to face, but at least it's a step. It's definitely better than just an email. So don't be lazy with that. Sometimes it's just it's easier to do that. Don't. This isn't about being easy. It's about doing the right job and doing it well. A lot of people, I think it's part of the problems that we have with journalism today. People just take advantage of all the technological advances and don't go in as depth, and we don't get as good a product as we should as journalists. All right, some preparing. That those P words. Proper pre-production planning prevents piss poor performance. Perseverance. This goes to it in anything you do. It's not just TV or film. It's anything you do, and this is among that. You gotta prepare for that interview. Especially if lots of times I didn't have time to do all this research. I had to get to where I needed to get. Maybe I was able to check up on something real quick on my phone, or I got a packet from my assignment desk with some information. Um, and it'll depend on the event and who I was talking to, and but if you have the time, a lot of times you will. Especially talking to certain people. It goes back to who you're talking to. Find out some information about what they've said, bigger things that they've done. See what directly relates to what you're going to talk to them about. Maybe things that they've said in the past or things that are related to them. So when you're in there and you're in, you're doing all your questions, they'll know. They'll know if you've done your homework because you're gonna get that look in their eyes. And when you ask them about something that you specifically looked up and they know that you would not know that unless um, that you did your homework, and you'll get the little eyebrow raise, huh? They really, and that aspect of you showing that you did your homework about what they're doing, that showing that you have real interest in that story, that you have interest in what they have to say, and you've impressed them at least a little bit on on the fact that you're putting in the work and it's not just going through the motions. And you're going to get more in-depth answers. You're going to get a little bit of respect from that person, and I just and simple, and you'll see it just in the simple eyebrow or eyebrow raise. Huh? They did their homework. That means a lot. If you don't think it means a lot, and then you're not going to be as good a reporter as you should be. So that means just scouring as much as you can in the amount of time you have before that interview to see what else you can get. Also, clips, promo websites, press, whatever you can find on whatever it is whatever you're looking for. It will make you more well versed and give a better idea, because then that'll help you form even more questions and have a smoother conversation with that person. All right. All right. Some other interviewing basics. Getting the interview. All right. Yeah, you can do it through email. You can do it through the phone. You can, lots of times. Sometimes you'll have some sort of desk. I had an assignment desk in TV station. I'm sure they have some sort of desk and sources at the newspapers and stuff like that, where they'll probably help you out too. But a lot of it is your homework that you do. How do you get there? You could be email, you could call them. I mean, it's, however way, Skype and whatever, to be able to get that interview. So it's if trying to find a time that works with that person, how you're going to do that, and it also and it can be tough out of the blue. I had that issue a few years, not so long ago, when I was doing lots of projects where interviews were involved, and I had to go all over Pennsylvania to interview people and go shoot places, and I had to go and I had to contact them. It's like, hey, I'm doing some projects here, and I'm doing stories on the following, and they had to I had to go and actually call or email these people, and they were very gracious. They were willing to do, and they don't know me from a hole in the wall, but they were willing to work with me. I was lucky to be able to work with these people, and these were essential people. I met. And they were essential to the stories I was doing. But I had to go and talk to them, and I had to do some interview. I had to do some research on these people and who these people are. So I gave it a shot, and I was lucky enough to get them. The Pennsylvania Teacher of the Year. I was doing a thing on teachers and students, and a series of stuff on that, and what makes a good teacher. And they were willing to talk with me. That I was able to go in on one of their work days when they weren't teaching. They gave me time to sit down with them, and I was lucky for that, and I was grateful for that. And my pieces came out better because of it. And then interacting with the source. It's meeting with them face to face, and like I said, that bond between you, going back and forth, and trying to figure out who that person is and what they feel comfortable with. So when you first go in, try to be somewhat formal, Mr. or Miss, or whatever the case may be, with whoever you're talking with. And then they'll usually say, "Oh, just call me Joe," or "Just call me Michelle," or whatever. Then you know what I'm saying here. And that's just go and being a little more professional and conservative with how you deal with them. And then usually that's normally my experience has been, especially everyday people, and even people who are experts. They'll say, "Hell, just call me this." So just play that by ear, see how that works. It's always best to meet face to face with these people, always, and always have a recording device. I was always using it. I always have a camera, so, and they know that going in. But if you're not doing the heck, you might be forced to do the camera now. Even if you're at a print outlet, a web outlet, they now want stuff, video interviews anyway. So even though it's for a newspaper, if you work for a newspaper, we have some sort of recording device, because you're not going to be able to write everything down. You're going to be writing notes and your shorthand of whatever your shorthand works for you, but you're not going to catch everything. That's what the recordings are for. And always ask. If I always go in and tell them I'm doing a documentary, I'm working at the news, so for a station, they know it's going to be on TV, so they're expecting a camera. But if you are print, just let them know I need to record this, And usually, if they agree to, they know you're from a press outlet. They're like, yeah, well, yeah, of course, you need something recorded. Um, Very rarely might you find someone who's like, oh no, I can't be recorded. Okay. I don't know if you have it anymore. I don't. We're this isn't the past where that was the case as much. Um, it's so just make sure, but still do give them the option. It's like, oh, is it okay if I record this? Chances are they're probably going to say yes, because they know what they're asking, and so. All right, and then working with your questions. Basically, you're going to come up with four to five basic questions on the big parts of what you're going to be talking to them about, because each story is a little different, especially when you're dealing with maybe scientific things or really specified topics. And then you kind of try to build off of that, build off what they're saying. And also remember, you can have your research that you've done before doing this as well. So you'll have even more information to help build those questions and give you at least a base of things going into that interview to work with. All right. So you're gonna have those base. You're gonna have the rough sketch of the big things, and it's but that's all part of it. It's all part of doing these interviews. Flow. You'll know if an interview is going well, on how well um, you go back and forth, how you're talking to each other. Like I said, first thing you do is tell them it's conversation. We're just talking, going back and forth. Um, and that helps a lot. But that's why I say don't have a piece of paper. Don't hide behind that piece of paper and sound like a robot. All right, you're talking to that person. You're interested in that person, and you will get a better reaction from that and more information from that person. And so it's going back and forth. So it won't seem that hard. Though it's an interview, it's you're just basically talking to them. It's you're getting information from them, and it's imperative that they're comfortable with you. And it can be intimidating, especially when they're not used to. They might be well versed in their topic, but they might not be well versed in being on camera. They might not be well versed in about articles. That's all part of what we do, and it's important. So if you're gonna have good flow, it's gonna be that conversation. It's not just gonna be like two people just talking about something. Man, those are the best interviews. And then it'd be easier. It's also when you have that connection. Sometimes you might have to ask some tough questions. But if you've already established that rapport with that person, it's going to be easier. So I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but it's going to be easier to ask the question and do it in a way that you can soften the blow before it, because you've already established a rapport with that person. To ask those tough questions sometimes, and it pops up. It does. Make sure you're taking notes. Yes, I said use a recorder, but you have to also take some other notes that help with what you're writing. You always need to take notes. It's part of it. Um, and then the last thing you always ask is anything else you think I should know. I always say, all right, a thing I always say, is there anything else I might have not asked you that you think is important that you want to get to the folks out there? That sounds kind of jokesy and whatever and corny, but remember, from television. So yeah, I always also say, oh, why didn't he ask me about this, or why didn't he ask me about that? This is me giving you that opportunity, and it's almost got like a yes or no thing, and that's something I always tell people to do. That's another thing. Don't, for the most part, don't try to, when you ask a question, don't have them in a way that will give an answer of a yes or a no when you're in the context of that full-fledged interview. You have to be able to form the question so you can get the answers that, informationally, but you also want good quotes. You want them to answer the question in a way that it gives you good content to work with when you're talking about the topics you're talking about. From even from if it's print or audio or from television standpoint, especially from a television standpoint, you need some sentences in there and to build upon, and the more the better. And you can do that by the way you form your questions. So try as much as possible to stay away from yes or no questions. Yeah, in that last wrap up thing, yeah, there is kind of a possibility or yes or no. And sometimes they might have just talked about everything, and and we've done a good job. We got everything. Um, no, it's the end of the answer is no. Then okay, great. But that's like the last question. Also, here's an important aspect. Um, when you're when you especially and this is more, and we'll talk about those soon. The the person on the street interview. First question I always ask is state and spell your first and last name, and give me, and this is weird, your title, why you're there, why am I talking to you, because it's very easy to get spellings wrong. Oh, John Smith. How do you spell it? JONSMYTH. You could have gotten that wrong. You don't want to get that wrong. It sounds stupid. You know how many people make that mistake? Lots of people make that mistake. That's a basic question. And yeah, it's awkward to say what's your title. Eh, it's not necessarily a title, especially in a man on the street. Oh, where you from? It's like maybe you're at a county fair. Oh, I'm from York or I'm from Hanover or whatever the case may be, and maybe you find out because that's more for like the lower third for that. But that's something I'm always thinking about because my needs are a little different, but you still have to know how to spell the people's names. If you're talking to someone of some significance, you probably already have the spelling of their name, and you might not necessarily know their official title. It might have changed, so you may want to. So you, in the case that you're talking to like a professor or something like that, maybe they have a specific title that's appropriate for them. Um, or maybe they just got a promotion or something like that, just to kind of get a, a feeling for who they officially are. That's important to ask. All right. Okay. Also, following up. Yeah, yeah. Once you're done with the interview, um, it's you want to try and stay in contact because you might need clarification on certain things, even with your recordings, even with notes you may have taken, and research that you've done. It might be something you weren't quite sure about. They said something you didn't fully understand. It might be a little bit of information here or there, a little tiny bit here, little details that you just want to make sure you get it right. And after you're done with your interview, say thank you. Be very very gracious and say thank you for coming. Let them know I may call you to just to double check on a couple things that I may find, or maybe there's something I might have missed that I need cleared up a little bit with. And usually they're very very open. After all that time interviewing with you, a quick reference here or there, and you might be able to email that. In that case, it might be just a quick phone call. Um, they're usually very very receptive to certain things like that. Yeah, some people are a little uptight. Oh, my life is so. Just work around it. It's not. They're not major aspects, but I mean, you never know. They might have said something, and then somebody else from that story might have said something that contradicted them, and you have to kind of like talk to them, and it all depends on the situation. But it's making sure sometimes you have to follow up. New details pop up, new aspects, um, and then sometimes before you send those emails or make those phone calls, um, think them through. Figure out how you're going to ask that. Form it in a way that'll get the best possible reaction. Because you want to get the most you can out of that out of that request for information to follow up with them. All right. Some things to do when you're forming some of those questions. Talk to people. Talk to fellow reporters, or maybe your editor, or producers, or assignment desk, or whoever or whatever the sources are that you work alongside with that are also in this. And yeah, we're all busy. I get that, especially, but there is a mutual respect amongst each other, especially when you first start. You're going to be asking a lot of questions. Yeah, you're going to learn a good amount in school, but you're going to really learn even so much more in the field. And a lot of that is through the mentors that you'll have when you get in the field. They're the people who people taught them, and they're passing on what they learned to you. And that's the way this industry works a lot. So part of that is sometimes you look at some of your questions, go back, look at some of those questions before you go to these interviews, and have other people look at it that are reporters or people who do what you're doing. Say, hey, does this work? Does this flow? How are you using this? It's important to make sure you're right with your questions, and you want to try to avoid. You don't want to do loaded questions. It's like what they mean by loaded questions is that old question type. It's like, oh, when did you stop beating your wife, Senator? And that's obviously it's an extreme thing, and answering that could not help that person in either way, shape, or form. Yes, this is an extreme example, but that's your idea of a loaded question. So because you can't win on either way answering that, and it's a very negative tone, obviously, with that specific question. But that's kind of the idea for loaded questions. Making sure someone else sees eyes on what you're doing, and that's all part of it. Anything that you create, especially when you're writing something or creating something like that, you want someone to take a look at your work. Say, especially people who do the job and are doing a lot of the same things you're doing. Hey, does this work? And it's a lot of times they'll be like, yeah, all right, let's take a look at that, and they'll say either yay, nay, or maybe tweak this a little bit. There's no shame in doing that. I can't. If I ask people questions, they're going to look down upon me. Especially if you don't ask questions especially when you first start. That's what's going to start people looking down on you. They expect you to not know what you're doing when you first get here. You're good enough. You have certain skills that you're good enough to work there, but at the same time, they know, and they know they're gonna because they were in the same boat you were in. So yeah, don't be too scared. Don't be scared to ask about certain questions before you ask them. And then that's the idea of on and off the record. Okay, we hear about this is on the record, this is off the record. You may have seen that a million times in TV shows and movies and stuff like that, but it is an actual thing. Basically, lots of times you'll have sources, and this I find, mostly, probably more in corporate and political venues that, off the record. This is what I think about it. Because sometimes they don't want to put their name to giving away certain pieces of information, but yet they want the certain piece of information out there. So you got to think about that. And it all depends on what the information is, how important that information is to the people that you serve, to your audience. What's the story about? How massive is that piece of information within the context of your story? And what would be the repercussions if you did keep them off the record? Does it still work with that? Or is it sometimes just people playing politics, especially in a governmental standpoint, It's like, oh, I don't want to get attributed to this because I don't want to get in trouble with, whoever, and they're just playing some sort of stupid political game, and they might be using you. They do that all the time, and lots of people fall for it all the time, especially with the web, and especially with the lack of journalism we seem to have nowadays, and corporate interests, and so many other biases and other things that mess up the storytelling process and the process of journalism, and plus, lack of staff and less people to do more work. It it's all there are many different factors for that. But yeah, but the thing is when if someone says I wanted this off the record, you have to say either yes or no, and you have a lot of times have to figure it out on the fly in while you're there. Um, so yeah, but like I said, don't do it lightly. No, it's off the record. Oh yeah, sure, I'll do it. It's like, yeah, it depends. You find a lot about that with life. It depends. Depends on the situation. Depends on the story. How germane that information is to the story. Um, and like I said, are you being used? And I couldn't possibly list every single situation of what could possibly happen. You have to be there at that time. You have to. That's part of being a journalist. It's like, oh wow, this is a lot harder than we thought. Yeah, it is a lot harder than you thought because there's a lot going on, and you got to worry about a lot of different things when you're going out there and getting these stories. So yeah, it's follow those, these lines, and sometimes you might, um, and you have to like answer them either way, and to either off or on the record. You might have to come down to talking to a higher up in your at your job about this, and then if you might have agreed to one thing, and then they say yeah, you can off the record, but your person who's above you says it's got to be on the record. You have to make sure you talk um, to that source, and then you might not be able to publish it, or there's a whole other set of circumstances that you might have to deal with. It's not as easy as people think. There's a lot of headaches involved, but that's the point. We're here to inform, and it's not necessarily an easy process. Um, that's why we're so important. We It has to stop being just fluff, and oh, just do what people want to hear or what makes them fuzzy, and keep going with a certain narrative. That doesn't do any good. We're here to do a job. We're supposed to do it correctly. So, and this is important if people are on or off the record. So just play it by ear. See what that's all I can say. It depends on the situation. Some other types of interviews that you have to do. Breaking news. You know how much breaking news I've done in my time? It's insane how much. There's a fire here. Oh, shots fired someplace. Oh, there was a crash, or any number of things can happen, and you got to get there. And like I always say, it's not where you are; it's where you got to be next. And you might be on that place to where you got to be next, and that where you got to be next changes while you're driving towards there, and you have to turn completely around and go 40 miles the other way to get to the other store that you need to get to. And dealing with breaking news is you have to go into the situation. When you go into a situation, it's always different. I'll give you a fire from my experience with fires, because you're going to be doing fires. It's just fires always happen. They will happen. That's just part of it. You will be going. If you're in this industry, you will be covering fires. Okay, and when you're covering those fires for breaking news, it happens out of nowhere. They have fire police, and when those fire police are there, usually there. If this is my experience, you listen to those fire police because they're the ones who I worked in television, so I had the big blue Xterra. We had Xterras, Nissan Xterras with the logos Fox 43 on there, and they knew who we were, and I had press passes, and And so they would say, okay, you can go on through, because usually the there's a block, it's blocked off, and they'll let you through, and then you go in slowly, and there might be someone else there, and then you just. The thing is, you have to stay out of the way. All right, there's going to be an area where they will allow you to be. All right, sometimes you have more um, freedom to what you where you have to cover and see what you have to cover. And then remember, I'm also shooting video, so I'm still trying to get shots of what I need to get for a fire standpoint. And then there's always you always have the area. But once if you're shooting, once you're done in that limited area that you're allowed to shoot in, but remember, because you have a zoom, um, you're not going to be able to get in right in, and you should not be in there. You should never be in the way of the first responders, the people who are taking care of the situation. But then there's always a part where the media is always just hanging out. And sometimes you have to wait for that. And a lot of times it's in the fire, it's waiting for the fire chief or a person who might be the person who's a spokesperson for the fire department. Normally it's the fire chief, just to let you know firefighter sound isn't the best interviews. They always have their same, we have structure fire, a 5-story thing. We brought in these, there's 5 departments that came in, and it's always basically the same thing with that. But you're getting all that, but you need that information. And then here is, you're not going to have any homework on there. They're not going to expect you to know things because it just happened. So they'll give you a certain bit of information of a lot of the basics, and then they'll say if you have any questions, okay, I'm happy to answer any questions you have now. Um, and that's where it's kind of like, oh, where did the fire start? With they might not have it, they might not mention it. You'd be surprised. Now we're still looking at a estimation, but it looks as of right now, and this might be one of those times to say it's off the record or this appears to be electrical, but they might not know that because they might need the investigators to do the fire investigator to do the investigator to find the source. Sometimes they do know at the time. And then they might relay information from people or witnesses that might have said something, or what firefighters found, or so they're not expecting, and you're gonna so there's not going to be a whole lot of homework there because you don't know. So what might be quote unquote stupid questions in other interviews aren't for this because it's breaking news. You don't know anything. They don't expect you to know anything. So they're expecting those kinds of questions. And especially if you better get this in this moment. And usually this breaking news thing, and it's technically a kind of press conference. We'll talk about press conference, even though it's very, very, it's outside and it's a group of the different reporters and cameras right by each other, and sometimes you have reporters, sometimes you don't. And you have to mic them up and get the shot, and you're all jam packed, basically, because you're all kind of close by. So don't. I know we're living in a social distancing time, but once we get back to normal, we're very close to each other. And it depends on, just to let you know, sometimes it depends on the market, how people work with you at rival media outlets. And it was up in central Pennsylvania. And especially on the weekend stuff, we were all basically in the same boat. We pretty much helped each other out for the most part. Occasionally, had people who were a little snotty, but it's the market. So, and you gotta take a feel about whatever the market is, however they work with each other, and it all depends. Sometimes they're friendly, sometimes they're not so friendly. But yeah, so and you're focusing when you're on these breaking news. You're focusing on the 5 W's and the 1 H, the who, what, where, when, how. Maybe they have a why, because you don't know anything. Yeah, it's breaking news. It's so see what they get, see what they give you, and then ask whatever questions you think you need to build that basic story. And then we go into the news conferences. And like I said, in this instance for the breaking news, they're mini press conferences. They're just not scheduled. A lot of them are scheduled, and it's done for a reason, because they can feel they can control the environment. It lets lots of different media outlets come to one place as opposed to constantly taking calls. Oh, can we set up an appointment? Can we set up an appointment with you? What they can do is they set up the press conference. So it was like, hey, we're going to have a press conference about this. And it allows them to put out the information they want to put out. And in a way, so you're all basically getting the same amount of information, same different sources. And there is an agenda. When I mean agenda, I mean like meetings and agenda meeting, and they have specifically, okay, this person starts, and then this person, this person, this person. Maybe sometimes, occasionally, someone goes out of order when they're doing these things. I've done it from a news standpoint. I worked for the city of Harrisburg, and they had press conferences, news conferences all the time about a variety of different things. Some fluffy, some important, but they were always planned out beforehand. And it's, it does set a tone, depending, a lot depends on the story itself. It could vary in very different ways. You got to be able to work with that and work around that when you're there. So they're able to control it up to a certain point, but doing a news conference is important, because you're gonna have certain information they're gonna put out there that's gonna give you a lot of information that you need for your story, but then you're gonna listen. You're gonna listen to sit back, all right. Sit back when it comes time to the press for other questions. Listen to what the other people are talking about. You want to there might be a certain angle to a story, but you want to see what else other people are doing, and if and they could do some work for you in a way. But sit back, see what people are saying, see the reactions that they're getting from these people in charge. Once again, it goes to picking up, even though it's not a sit down one-on-one interview. There's tones, there's nonverbal communication. You can pick up on how people are reacting. You can see how other people alongside who work with these people who are at the podium, you can pick up on how they react to it. That's all part of it. So you'll see what they do, and what you're going to do is you're going to be thinking all as well. You're going to be critically thinking. It's like, could I follow up on that question, or is there something? You have to always be thinking when you're doing this. Your brain always has to get going. You can't just get caught up in the in the tunnel vision of, oh, I got what I need for the story of the who, what, where, when, how. It's bigger than being a real journalist. Is always thinking and trying to come up with the new thoughts and new angles, and is there something more there? And then eventually, you might have a question of your own there, but there's also a lot of times, now this doesn't happen all the time. After a news conference, sometimes they'll have a news conference um, on one story that you still have to cover, but you might have another story that you've been working on as well. And sometimes you say the mayor is talking. There was a story about, I don't know, a totally other topic, and say, oh, is it okay if I talk to you about this other topic afterwards? And usually that's where a lot of times they'll get a couple quick questions. It won't be very long, because they don't have that much time to deal with. But lots of times they will, depending on their schedule, allow other questions about other things after that for the opportunity to talk with them. So that don't just leave there. If you have other things to talk to them about, see if you can talk to them about real quick about some of the reaction to some other story that you're working on. That because these people are working a lot to deal with a lot of different subjects. All right, so that's another thing to think about with news conferences. So they're able to control a lot of stuff, but up to a point. Plus, it's convenient from all those people coming in. But it's not necessarily easy. It's having got to keep your head on straight and think critically. Lots going on. All right, it's all part of it. It's a lot is going on. These are all things you have to think about when you're being a journalist. It's what makes it even harder. Some other types of interviews. Person on the street. I've done so many of these. Sometimes they're great. Sometimes they're terrible and they never see the light of day. Because some people are good at speaking, and some people, and I'm not just talking about age-wise, just in general. That's why I said it's important to be able to form the questions in a way that won't allow them to say yes or no questions. And they're also they depending on the story, it's the person on the street interview is it gives perspective to possibly reactions to bigger stories. Could be it's a lot of localization. It could be how many stories we do on what does Main Street feel about what's going on in Washington? How does that affect their bottom line or their pocketbook or their wallet or their whatever, and or how do they feel about this? And it could be any number of topics, and this is actually is an important aspect of getting reaction from everyday people. And depending on the story, it's appropriate. If it's a real serious, bigger, over the top, important story, then maybe not so much. That's why you would get maybe it's like talking about astronomy. No one's gonna really know or care. They're not gonna give you good sound about that. That's why you get the astronomy professor from the school to talk about that, who's gonna know about it. But I mean, there's other things that and you get a lot of person on the street things. How many times they go to parades or stuff like that, or events or fairs, and you're gonna be doing a lot of that stuff too. They're fun. Charity walks and charity motorcycle rides and 5Ks. There's a lot of 5Ks, and yeah, part of those I would always get an interview with an organizer from it. Maybe the mayor was there for it, or some other political person. But then you try to get maybe a couple of people who were there, and lots of times you might be surprised who you get, especially for some of those charity things, and you might have someone who's like just a person who's been battling, say, cancer or doing things for cancer, and they're being part of this, and they've got an entire team with them, and that's a whole other story. That could become an even bigger story. You find out that they've been battling cancer for so long, and they're finally ready to go out, and this is, and you find out even more and more and more because there's a story with everybody, and so it can become a much bigger story than it was before. And you might, you'll still cover that story that you had originally, but there might be a whole other slew of stories with this person. These are human interest stories. That's part of what we do. So it adds perspective to the whole news gathering process and news storytelling process. And then there'll be the times when you're going to have hostile interviews. People who don't really want to talk, but sometimes they're in positions where you have to. It's going to be tough to ask the question, and it's your job. Maybe somebody did something wrong, or said something wrong, or you have to be professional about it. You can't be confrontational about it. You have to be professional in the way you ask the question. You have to, you have to be. It's like, oh, well, this is what was said. What is your reaction? Or this is alleged that you are accused of, or this. What is your reaction to this kind of thing? You have to be, like it says, even-handed. Okay, you have to be professional about it. You have to be polite, but you still have to do the job. You can't give up. Don't be over the top. Rude. It's a lot of stuff you see is in movies, okay? Oh, look at me, I'm going to get you. No, that's not the way it is. If you're going to be you have to be professional about your job, okay? Don't let the movies and TV shows taint the way you do your reporting, okay? They're TV shows, they're movies. They're there to get the most drama out of stuff. But sometimes you're going to have people who don't necessarily want to ask or answer your questions. And when you have to ask those tough questions, you have to be polite about it, and still show impartiality but still do your job. It's not easy. It's tough, but it's something that has to be done because you're trying to get a story, and sometimes stories aren't easy. Okay, good journalism isn't. All right. Sometimes you're doing profiles. Profiles are many different angles of a given person. So yeah, you'll talk to that person. It might be a couple times, and then also you'll talk to other people because they might bring up in your questioning. You should try to find out more in-depth stuff about who helped them along the way to get where they're going and who's helped respond, and then talk to them. Those mentors or people or whoever these other people who really know them well. Because you're doing a profile piece, and you have to get into the real um, in-depth people. Now, these are the people who know them best. Um, so you're gonna have you need lots of time to if you're doing a profile. Profiles are in-depth stories on these people, and you're gonna have to spend some real time with them beforehand. Well, while with them, with other people that know them. Plus, you have to do a lot of homework beforehand. And some people said, "Oh, I heard everything." No, you haven't heard everything about them. You have to just dive right in and completely envelop yourself in that person, their life, and who they are, and everything about them, because it's a profile on them. And so it's if you're going to do that, it's going to take a while. This isn't one of those one and done, done with the story profiles. If you're doing profiles, you've come along pretty well where you work and they've trusted you to do such a thing. They don't just give that to anybody off the street. Right? You had to have been there and proven yourself to get these. So you have to take time to prepare and do as much research and also pace the interview, see how it goes. Because if they're sitting doing a profile, you want some real in depth stories with them. And once again, you have to establish that connection with them and being there with them and personally and sitting down. That's why a lot of times we will go to places where they feel comfortable, be either work or home or or some other place or some other place that we have to make them feel comfortable. That's why we go into these places, and they don't usually normally come to the media outlet. We usually go to them, and it could be meeting at a restaurant or a park or their house or whatever when they're doing this because they want to be as comfortable as possible, and they're agreeing to you let them into their life. And so yeah, they're gonna try. You're gonna try to make them as comfortable as possible, and finding the right pace for that interview. And that, like I said, goes back to everything I already told you. You know, it's just more in depth stuff and following up with other people. So secondary sources, because then you need at least like two or three other people that might help in forming this story. And also, it's good because when you get done talking to those other people about this person, um, you may want to go back to the original person and say, "Oh yeah, um, they confirmed this, but there's something they said was a little different than when you said, and they thought a little differently." And then they might have accidentally said something wrong because sometimes people misremember things. Sometimes it's just yes, sometimes it's just an excuse because they don't want to get in trouble. But sometimes people misremember things. It's been a while, um, and they've been through a lot. So it's, but I mean that's part of it. And then you go back to and to confirm certain things. But yeah, profile pieces take a little while. There's a lot of in depth in there. You want to get it right. Right? So when you're doing those profile pieces, you've at least established some sort of trust. You're not going to get those right away. Just don't know that. Then confirming information. Sometimes what you're going to do is sometimes we're looking for information because information's what we're about. Sometimes we're also trying to get good quotes. I do it with certain stories, especially a lot of charity things. I always ask, "Oh, how does it feel?" To the people who are organizers of those things. So, how does it feel to see all their hard work? She put all this work into it, and it's a once a year thing. Seeing all these people come out in droves and see that your all your work has come out to this, and all these people are coming out for this, and I can guarantee you're always going to get at least a little bit of welling up in the eyes because that's what I'm looking for. Because in that case, it's a good thing. It's a good event. it more, if people coming together, and this is what people are passionate about. Also, open-ended questions. Um, these are questions that can't just give yes or no answers. You want more detail to your questions. Sometimes when people ask closed questions, sometimes that's all you need, especially if you're following up on confirming it. Is this spelling right? Is this the right title for this person? Or was I right about this date that you said this happened? And just say yes or no. And sometimes, in the context of those closed door questions, you might have to ask a why or how come, and um, that can help give you even more information or even better quotes. Because remember, part of it is information, part of it is the quotes that help build the whole story, gives the reader perspective, and it paints a picture with just your words when you're talking about print, of what's going on, and that's the whole point. We're telling the story, and that's the only way you get to tell a good, full, and complete story, by getting those questions from these people, by getting answers to these questions from these people, to give it the full picture. And then sometimes we try to get a reaction and be good. Like I would try to get or sometimes be careful with what you do. You might get a negative reaction. Be very, very wary about that, because then you might not get, depending on what you ask. People can be touchy. It might be a touchy situation. Be careful. All right. Make sure, is it worth it? Is it the right time to ask that? I think, is there a better way to ask the question? And I know what I'm doing is asking you to think very, 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 very quickly on the feet while you're right there on the ground, but you have to think critically. This is a part of thinking critically, being quick on your feet, being able to understand what you're saying, and not putting your foot in your mouth and jeopardizing a story, or you're telling a bad story or getting something wrong. This journalism thing's a lot harder than most people think. There's a lot you have to worry about, and more, even more now with all the technical aspects of it too. In addition, there are all the important ethical and good journalistic practices that you're supposed to follow, and especially in this day and time when things seem to just kind of go to the wayside, which is sad, but it's part of it. It's up to us to still can try to be good journalists. All right. So if you haven't learned anything from there, some major points of today is be prepared. Go back to the proper pre-production planning prevents piss poor performance. And when all said and done, perseverance. Keep persevering. Look, research, do your homework before you go out there. It's essential. If you don't, they'll know it. You will not be doing the job that you were hired to do. And you may not have that job if you're not constantly preparing. That's why I keep throwing it down your throat. I'm never going to stop. I don't care. Is it a pain? Yeah, I don't care, because I know what's out there. I know what you need to do. I know what you need to succeed to do it. Is it a pain? Yes. But if you're going to do it right. Understand your purpose. Why am I there? Who is this person? What's the story? Understand why you're and focus on that. But remember, also keep your eyes open, your ears open. Think critically, and get that story. Maybe there's an even bigger story with it. And listen. Listening's everything. Most people don't listen. That's why I ask you to pay attention. Why do I ask these stupid bonus questions? Are you paying attention? Nobody pays attention. And it's more than ever they don't listen. They don't pay attention. They don't know what's going on. Why is this important? Oh, this is lame. This is stupid. No, I'm trying to hone your listening skills. There's a lot going on, and people are so distracted in 17 different ways. Now more than ever with all the technology, and people just focusing on what they like, and that's it. And here, I'm on this website or that website, or I'm on this social media. This is all I care about. This Twitter or TikTok, and oh, did you see this? And this is up for 15 seconds. And oh, look over here. Look at this pretty light. Oh, look at the birdie. Over here, over the... No, it drives you nuts. But you still have to listen. You're a journalist. You can't tell a story without listening, and you have to have hyper listening abilities. How many people listen or don't listen and are just oblivious? You can't be. Not as a journalist. I'm sad to say there's probably a lot out there who just get caught up in the job and I just want to survive, and a whole lot of good journalism isn't happening, and the people are not getting what they need. It's at least do my part to make sure you guys are focused on this. That's why I do this. I want you to do it right. All right? Well, congratulations. This is it. The final ending video lecture. It's time to celebrate. I know you're happy. All right. Just keep on focusing on the work. I'll give you some updates on some stuff coming up soon. I already threw something out there recently. All right. Congratulations. No more video lectures. All right. See ya. Bye.